Now time for my sermon. There's this Jewish story from Afghanistan, and it goes like this. There's once a ruler named the Shah Abbas. Now, one of the Shah's hobbies was to dress as a commoner and visit his subjects to see how they were doing. One day, while he was wandering his kingdom in disguise, he discovered a Jewish man named Laban in a poor hut eating a simple meal, but singing joyfully Shabbat songs. The Shah asked if he could be invited inside, and Laban, not knowing the stranger was the Shah, invited him and offered him half of his meager meal. When the Shah asked what this man did for a living, he replied that he was a self-taught cobbler. All day long, said Laban, I walk about the streets in men's shoes, and with the pennies I earn, I buy myself food. The Shah couldn't believe that such a poor soul would be singing so joyfully, and he wanted to test Laban and see if he could go get him to stop singing. So the next day, the Shah decrees that only people with permits are allowed to cobble shoes. The Shah is certain that this would dash this Jewish man's spirits, and he went back in disguise to see him. And as soon as the Shah turned onto the street of the poor hut, he could hear Laban's voice singing Shabbat songs from down the street. And when he visited Laban, he quizzed him on his day. And Laban replied, well, I couldn't cobble today, so I drew water for people from the well and used my earnings to buy bread. Feeling put out and ornery, the Shah decided to make a new decree that for one day, no one could draw water. That evening, the Shah adorned his commoner costume and set out to discover if Laban was in high spirits enough to sing without being able to afford bread. Unfortunately, once again, as soon as the Shah rounded the bend of the street with the poor little hut, he could hear the unmistakable sound of Laban singing. So the Shah visited Laban and quizzed him on his day, to which Laban replied, well, I couldn't draw water today. I helped cut wood and used the money to buy myself bread for the evening. The Shah, feeling outsmarted by a poor commoner, decided to try something different for the next day. He made a proclamation that all woodcutters needed to report to the palace for mandatory and unpaid guard duty. When Laban got there, he was given a sword and told to guard a door, which he did all day. When the Shah was in disguise, he visited Laban again that evening, and he heard the same unmistakable sound of Laban singing. But this time, he caught Laban fashioning a wooden sword blade and attaching it to the metal hilt of the original sword. And when the Shah asked him what he was doing, Laban replied, since I couldn't work today, I sold the sword blade to pay for my meal, but I kept the hilt, and I will have the wood sword sheathed in the scabbard. What if the captain were to check swords tomorrow? Asked the Shah, to which Laban just replied, blessed be God. Well, the Shah felt like he had him, and he devised a devilish way to get Laban to stop singing. The next day, the captain of the guard summoned Laban and placed a prisoner in his charge. The captain told Laban that the prisoner was ruthlessly condemned to death and that Laban must execute him. I cannot, said Laban. I will not kill another person. You must obey, said the captain. The Shah himself has ordered it. So Laban grabbed the hilt of his sword, and while the crowd gathered to witness the execution, Laban shouts, God of the universe, you ask us not to kill, and you know that I am not a murderer. If the man who stands before me deserves to die, let my sword be made of steel. But if he is innocent, I pray that you turn his steel into a blade of wood. Then when Laban drew forth his sword, behold, it was made of wood, and all the people gasped in astonishment. Then they all decided that the prisoner should be set free. The Shah, feeling quite bested by this Jewish man, decided he was done with the charades and invited him to his palace, where the Shah revealed who he was and offered him the coveted position as royal advisor. And every Shabbat, the halls of the palace were alight with the singing of Laban, the Shah's trusted advisor. Courage is a funny thing. It can often be hard to recognize. In my childhood, courage meant picking up a sharp sword and fighting back. Courage meant good, fighting evil with righteous intention. Courage in my childhood was easy and obvious. I would never consider Laban in this story to be courageous, maybe just clever. But now, as I am older, I've come to learn a lot about courage. I've come to accept that courage often means standing up to unsurmountable odds with nothing but a sword. And courage can also mean just to not stop singing. Unfortunately, we may need to rely on our courage more than ever. Across the country, this has been a difficult year for the Jewish people. The Anti-Defamation League, which tracks anti-Semitic harassment, reports there were 3,697 incidents of harassment against Jewish people in 2022 alone. That is a 36% increase from the previous year, and the highest number on record since 1979, when the ADL started tracking these numbers. This is a troubling development, with fear that 2023 will break the record again. For more context, a decade ago, the ADL reported 751 incidents, and these numbers have been weighing heavily on me. Now, I feel fortunate that Alaska has not seen much anti-Semitic activity in the past year. However, I believe this isn't due to the lack of hate in our state, but by the enormous effort it takes to prevent it in the first place. Every time I've been forced to respond to an anti-Semitic incident, I feel I have already failed. Because fully preventing anti-Semitism means people don't have the motivation, the appetite, or are enabled to hate Jews in the first place. And while this may seem like an improbable goal, I believe that it is a possible one. So much of anti-Semitism is about managing emotions. When people feel that their lives are difficult or they're living through a time of upheaval, they look for reasons to blame for their hard situation. Often, Jewish communities, being the other, are easy targets to blame for problems that have nothing to do with us. Because hating Judaism is a time-worn occurrence, and it's easy for people to slip back into the well-worn rut of hate that is anti-Semitism. But more importantly, anti-Semitism is incredibly emotional for us Jews. We experience the fear and anxiety of its lingering miasma of malaise all around us. Our generational trauma is triggered by it, and we have to struggle with explaining it to our children. And no child is ever old enough to learn about anti-Semitism. And it's due to this hate that I often tell our Jewish children that Judaism is a responsibility as much as a religion. And I remember growing up here in Alaska, having to explain Judaism to many of my friends and classmates who never encountered Judaism before, except through me. And I know that almost all of our children have a similar experience. As Jews, we find ourselves living a narrative that doesn't align with the prevailing American experience. For example, at Christian places of worship, they often do not hire police officers to look after their building during their most important holidays. In fact, most churches actually leave their doors unlocked all day, every day. This makes me emotional because I wish we could do the same. But we have to face this reality, whether we like it or not. We must make use of all the tools available in our arsenal, even if they're only wooden swords or singing Shabbat songs. And here at Congregation Beth Shalom, there's been a huge effort underway to prevent anti-Semitism. This effort involves embracing our Anchorage community instead of hiding away from it. Every month, we join the Greater Friends Baptist Church to help feed those in need at Fairview Rec Center through the Mobile Food Bank program. We sponsor polling places and work as polling volunteers. We organize Mitzvah Mall, and that offers an opportunity for nonprofits to fundraise before the holiday season. We support LGBTQ causes. We have experts come as guest speakers and inform us on the issues. We have built strong relationships with law enforcement, nonprofits, local and state governmental entities, and the faith community. We always have plans in the works to do more. All this activity is driven by the basic Jewish value of making the world a better place, also known as Tikkun Olam, but they specifically serve to prevent anti-Semitism. The truth is, our efforts at Congregation Beth Shalom are helpful, but they're not as effective as what you all can do. The most powerful tool against anti-Semitism, even more powerful than a wooden sword, is courage. The courage to say casually, not even that dramatically, that I am Jewish to your non-Jewish friends and colleagues. Because anyone who is not Jewish, who knows someone who is Jewish, is less likely to think ill of us. And while I can prevent hate, you can prevent ignorance, which is more important. As I mentioned before, our children are already doing this work at their schools. But there's still more to do. I first encourage you to join one of the programs I mentioned before. We're always looking for more people to help make our city a better place. I also encourage you to openly counter and report any anti-Semitism you personally experience. You can report it at the ADL website, or you can call the FBI, literally at 1-800-CALL-FBI. They both want to know about these things. And the most powerful way to prevent anti-Semitism is at the personal level. You may encounter a person who you know who professes hate or ignorance of Judaism. If you summon the courage to calmly tell them you are Jewish and you find their words hurtful, then you can possibly de-escalate the situation in a positive way. Judaism is a responsibility as much as a religion, and this is not a bad thing. This responsibility helps us improve our character, our moral fiber, and our courage. This responsibility teaches us that courage is not the lack of fear, but to act while feeling it. That courage is not just found in grand gestures, but courage is also discovered in small acts, like singing Shabbat songs, no matter how you feel. But I look forward to the day that we don't need a police presence on our most sacred of days. And I can't wait for the time that we can leave our doors unlocked all day, every day. However, until that day comes, it is our responsibility to keep anti-Semitism at bay through good works and goodwill, through personal relationships, and by showing ourselves and the Anchorage community how powerful a wooden sword can truly be. Thank you.